Hi everyone. Welcome back to Woo Can Cook. My name is Wesley, and this is a show where we are slowly cooking our way through all of the food from my childhood. Today we're diving back into our series dedicated to the wonderfully weird and strange world of Chinese fusion cuisine with a shot at a dish from the Woo Can Cook pop-up menu, which are these Taiwanese sloppy joe sliders. For those unfamiliar in this series, we have been taking iconically Chinese and Taiwanese dishes that come from more traditional wok cooking, then smashing them headfirst into any number of other cuisines that I goddamn well feel like. More specifically, today we'll be taking this Taiwanese slow braised minced pork, or Rou Zao fan, served as a sloppy joe slider in a Hawaiian sweet roll, then finally finished with some Korean sweet pickled daikon. Woo, mama, that's a lot of things. Anyway, as you might guess, a Rou Zao fan, or colloquially simply Rou fan, is more traditionally served over rice, often in a family-style meal with a few other dishes. Some may recall the braised pork belly Rou fan that we did a few months back, which in fact stays fairly traditional in approach. Today though, I thought it would be fun to exercise some creative liberties and thicken up the sauce to our Rou fan just a touch more than we normally would, giving the finished dish more of a chili-like consistency, which is perfect for, you guessed it, a sloppy joe. Finally, just to make this all a little bit more complicated, because I mean, what the hell, why not? We'll be topping our sliders today with a Korean pickled daikon for that crisp, bright finish that's essential to any sloppy joe. Okay, so let's get into it. Alright, so diving right in, we're kicking things off here today with the aromatics of our wok fry coming up. This is gonna be 4 cloves of crushed and minced garlic, followed by 1 inch or about 1 tablespoon of finely minced ginger. Then next up are our shiitake mushrooms, about 6 of them today, which I'm rehydrating in boiling water for about 10 to 15 minutes or until tender. As always with shiitake mushrooms, we're reserving this mushroom water as it is absolutely packed with umami. This is going to be a particularly important ingredient for our braise today as well, so one more reminder, do not throw this out. We're slicing our shiitakes up into strips and then setting them aside for a moment while we get to our daikon next. This is a type of Korean pickled daikon that has been pickled in rice vinegar and turmeric, hence the neon yellow color here. We're slicing these up into coins for our sliders today, which will give us a nice bright and slightly sweet contrast to the Rou fan, sort of like a bread and butter pickle, which should really help cut through the richness of our Rou fan. Moving on to our pork next, this is 16 ounces or 1 pound of ground pork that we're going with today. Now, for the kosher eaters out there, traditionally a Rou fan is done with pork and only pork, which is very much a Chinese food culture thing. If I'm being honest though, since we're obviously way outside of the realm of traditional cooking here anyway, you can do a Rou fan with any fatty ground meat that you want. Ground turkey, ground chicken, or 80-20 beef chuck would all work wonderfully here. And look, I'm just gonna say it, there is really no reason why Chinese and Taiwanese cooking needs to have this much pork in it, seriously. Sorry, Grandma. Anyway, next up for our marinade, we're kicking things off here with 4 tablespoons of soy sauce and 1 tablespoon of Shaoxing wine to start, followed by a few dry ingredients to help us lean into our aromatic spices coming up. This is going to be half a teaspoon each of white pepper, Chinese 5-spice, and cornstarch. Moving on to our braising sauce next, the star of the show today is really going to be our dark soy sauce, so most of what we're adding here is going to be to complement this element. To kick things off, this is another 4 tablespoons of soy sauce and 1 tablespoon of Shaoxing wine going in first, followed as promised by our 2 tablespoons of dark soy sauce going in next, which is going to bring all of that deeply rich umami to our braise today. Then finally, last up is 2 tablespoons of brown sugar for a little bit of sweetness to round this all out, and then in a separate bowl, I'm mixing up 2 tablespoons of cornstarch in water for our cornstarch slurry, and we're heading over to the stove. Over on the stove, first up, we're going to start things off here by dry toasting some whole spices for the aromatics of our braise. Now, essentially what we're doing here is using any or all of the spices associated with Chinese 5-spice, which is a very iconic spice blend associated with Chinese and Taiwanese cooking. For us today, that's going to be some cinnamon sticks, star anise, Tianjin peppers, and Szechuan peppercorn. As some may recall from a few of our other recipes though, Chinese 5-spice is not necessarily limited to 5 spices. So for those looking for substitutions here, other common spices that you might use instead include things like clove, fennel seed, ginger, nutmeg, cardamom, or licorice, any or all of which would be very appropriate to use as well. We're giving this a dry toast over medium-low heat for about 2 to 3 minutes until fragrant before removing to some cheesecloth so that we may tie this up into a neat little spice package for our braise later on. Back over on the stove, I have my wok heating up as hot as possible this time. Then I'm adding 4 tablespoons of peanut oil and, as always, long yao for that nice non-stick surface. Then going in here first are my aromatic veggies. Here's my garlic and ginger going in, followed by my ground pork up next. We're flipping that spatula to an overhand grip here so that we may break up any large chunks of meat going on, then giving this all a toss for about 2 to 3 minutes until browned. Remember that all of this is going to be braising for about 4 hours later on, so we're not really focusing on cooking the pork through at this point, but rather we're just focusing on creating some fond at the bottom of our wok here instead. Then next, I'm deglazing with my reserved mushroom water, then followed by our braising sauce, shiitake mushrooms, and spice packet going in as well. Then, as promised, we're letting this simmer for a minimum of 2 hours, or ideally closer to 4 to 6 hours to really let those spices get to know each other, adding some additional water here as needed when things start reducing. 4 to 6 hours later, I'm fishing out my spice packet here, and now fair warning, if you're going for a super traditional Rou Zao fan, you can go ahead and stop right here and serve this all over rice. But if we want to make some sloppy joes though, we're gonna need to tighten up that sauce a little bit, otherwise you're gonna be eating some sloppy joe soup, which is not ideal. So going in here next is my cornstarch slurry, which I'm adding gradually until we get to the thickness that we're looking for, before finally removing this all from heat. Then back over on my cutting board, I've got some Hawaiian sweet rolls here waiting, which I'm gonna split in half so that we may fill them with our rou fan, followed by a topping of our pickled daikon coins, and we're ready to eat. Okay, so I'll start off by addressing the obvious. If you came here looking for a super traditional approach to a Taiwanese rou fan, first off, why would you click on a video that says Taiwanese sloppy joes? That's on you, man. But if I'm being totally honest though, aside from the glaringly obvious, this is actually sticking fairly close to what a pretty traditional rou fan looks like. The combination of spices along with the slow braised pork in dark soy sauce genuinely filled the house with a smell that absolutely brought me back to my childhood. I'm not sure what it is, but there's something about the smell of Chinese 5-spice that is very nostalgic for me. Then the addition of those Hawaiian sweet rolls and Korean pickled daikon seem to come together in a combination that is somehow simultaneously both familiar and new at the same time. Finally, the last bit that I'll mention here at the risk of stating the obvious is that this dish has absolutely no structural integrity at all. We serve these at the pop-up with a fork and knife and a lot of napkins, so don't plan on eating this on a first date, cause true to its name, these things are very sloppy. Okay, so that's it everyone. I hope you enjoyed this and I hope you give this one a shot. For those who are new to the channel, this one is part of a larger series dedicated to Chinese fusion recipes, so definitely check out that series next if you haven't yet, because there's a lot of these. For the Bay Area locals, we'll be adding this Taiwanese sloppy joe slider to the menu at the Wu Can Cook pop-ups in the coming weeks, so come by and say hi if you can. More about that at wucancook.com/eats. As always, like, comment, subscribe, share, be nice interneters, and I'll see you soon.